Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your guest for the next hour as we talk about everything racing from a packed 4th of July weekend. Joining me in the studio, Richard Youden. How are you, buddy?
I'm very good. Yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Yeah, so we're coming out of the 4th of July weekend, which I know you Brits don't celebrate the same way we do. But action-packed weekend we had all three major series running, in addition to another Tony Stewart SRX race sandwiched in the middle there. But what I do want to lead off about is some news I read this morning about a Formula One driver, that being the Argentinian Carlos Reutemann. I'd read that he passed away this morning at the age of 79 following some illnesses and whatnot. But got me thinking. I remember Carlos fondly driving. He was very active right about the time I started racing, and here's a guy that was realistically one of the best of his generation. He came up short winning a championship, although the guy probably deserved one, but he had finished runner up in the championship once, and he finished third place in the championship 3 times over his career, and his career wasn't long. He was started with a partial season in 72 and ended after the second race of 82, collected 6 poles and 12 Grand Prix wins along the way. Now, this day and age, 12 Grand Prix wins doesn't sound like a lot. That's one season for Lewis Hamilton. Although during his era, you consider they only raced 14 to 16 times a year. The cars did not have the incredible reliability that they had then. And, when they're realistically speaking, Reutemann with 12 wins was 8th on the all-time list at the time he retired. So that's how much the sport has changed over the years. But so Reutemann, here's a guy who won the pole in his first Grand Prix, which happened to be in his home of Argentina, which made the crowd go wild. He was driving for Bernie Ecclestone's Brabham team at the time. And that feat to win the pole as a rookie there's only 2 other guys in history that have done that, and that's been Mario Andretti, Villeneuve. Correct. Yeah. So, Carlos had a pretty good season. He had won a race. He won one of the non-championship races during his rookie season. So that would not count towards his win total of 12 because they did still have non-championship races there. He finished well in the championship the following season, and in 1976. Brabham was struggling a little bit. They had picked up the Alfa Romeo engine, and it was about the time the German Grand Prix where Niki Lauda had his accident, and Reutemann was able to negotiate his way out of his Brabham contract to sign with Ferrari to replace Niki Lauda. Now, what they didn't count on was Lauda very speedy recovery. I believe Reutemann only raced once.
2 races?
Once or twice, yeah. Or that might have been just the once. Because I think Ferrari did a race with just one car, just Regazzoni, and then when Lauda came back unexpectedly, quicker than expected, I believe they entered 3 cars in that race because Reutemann and Lauda were both entered in there. So, and then, so he stayed with Ferrari for a couple of seasons. He actually was beating Niki Lauda in the championship in the early part of 77. he was up 2 wins on Lauda, ahead in the points, but as the season wore on, Lauda kind of stuck his claim as the team leader there, and then Lauda abruptly left the team at the end of 77, which allowed for Gilles Villeneuve to take that seat for the last 2 races of the year. So in 78, Carlos Reutemann is team leader now at Ferrari. Had a great 78 season. The problem is that Team Lotus had a better 78 season. So he finished 3rd in the championship behind Mario Andretti and Ronnie Peterson, because the Lotus was just, it was a very different and new ground effects technology coming into the sport that eventually changed the way all race cars look and perform this day and age. So Reutemann, Ronnie Peterson dies at, the Italian Grand Prix towards the end of that season. So Reutemann said, okay, yeah. So Lotus has this great car. He goes ahead and he signs for Lotus for 1979. So wouldn't you know it, Lotus has a pretty miserable season. And then the guy, Jody Scheckter, that Ferrari signs to replace Reutemann, wins the championship. It's like, poor Carlos, wrong place, wrong time. But he's still winning races. He outperformed Mario at Lotus the early part of the season. Carlos was in the Lotus 79, the last year's car, and Mario was trying to get the Lotus 80 to work, which turned out to be a phenomenal flop. And then, in the meantime, during the 79 season, the Williams team comes on strong. So Carlos makes a hasty exit from Lotus after 1 season to sign with Williams, where he's teamed with Alan Jones. And the onset, Jones and Reutemann got on pretty well. Jones wins the championship in 80. I believe Reutemann is second that year. I believe that's the year he finished second. And then the following year, 81, Reutemann's really strong out of the box, and he pretty much leads the championship the entire season. But along the way, there's some team politics that go on there, right? At the Long Beach Grand Prix, the team orders come out, and Reutemann is told to let Alan Jones go by to get the higher finishing position. He's not happy with this, but he does this, right? A few races later, Reutemann is leading the race. Jones is second. They throw out the pit board that says P1 Jones, which means move over, let Jones win the race. And Reutemann refuses. He goes ahead and wins the race. And this, causes a little controversy. We've, seen a little of these team rules that were defied here and there over the years. But it doesn't sit well with Alan Jones. And so their relationship is fractured from there. Although through the balance of the season, Reutemann is the stronger driver and more consistent driver, leading the points through much of the season. But then there's another incident in Germany where Jones's car malfunctions. So they tell Carlos, okay, you need to give Alan your car, and we'll get the spare car off the, out of the back of the truck, blow some of the dust off it, and you could drive that. Well, of course, that car fails in the race for Carlos, which is probably one of the defining moments in the championship, why it was as close as it was. And then, when we get to the finale in Vegas, Reutemann, I think he only needs to finish like 5th to win the championship, something like that. And Piquet's right behind him in the championship. So, and Carlos has this horrible race. Just from the get-go, he's getting passed on lap 1. It turns out he's got a malfunctioning gearbox. The best he could do is soldier that thing home. So I believe it was like 11th. Piquet manages to finish 5th to win the championship by 1 point. And Piquet is physically exhausted. He gets out of the car and collapses because, Vegas even in the fall, it's pretty hot and humid. But again, so Carlos's career worked out like a tragic hero. And there were people that really liked the guy. He was adored in his home country. People thought he was wonderful. And then there were other guys that just really didn't like the way he operated. Some thought he was opportunistic with the way he switched from team to team, trying to get the best ride. But, at the same time, these top teams were hip to sign him. Why? Because he was a heck of a good driver. He had the ability to pick and choose his rides, which was, a thing that he earned with his behind the wheel. And then, so 1982, he's feeling pretty defeated after losing this championship, but he comes back for 82. Second race of the season, he calls Frank Williams and says, I'm done.
Oh, excuse me.
And walked away from Formula One and never looked back. In his later years, he gets into politics. He ends up being a governor for a province in Argentina there. And there are people that would really like him to run for president of Argentina, although he declines. But that's kind of how respected that he is in some country of Argentina. So, but yeah, that's his career in a nutshell. And so, Richard, do you have any thoughts? I know you've been looking up some interesting things about Carlos as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was obviously sort of before my time. I mean, he retired before I was born. Sorry, Frank. But no, he's one of those names that has always been sort of synonymous with the sort of almost win, sort of, what could have been, what should have been. And as you say, when he retired there in 82, he had, was 8th on the all-time win list. And that's over 30 years of racing. And you think there'd been, excuse me, 30 something world championships before he retired, and he was still 8th on that list of winners. So, he certainly deserved the championship, and his skill and determination and his ability certainly probably didn't reflect his actual achievements in terms of championship results, which was a shame. You see guys that you think, oh, he didn't deserve that success, but there's also on the flip side, there's guys that think they deserve more success than they got. And it was, as you say, he had a habit, unfortunately, of sort of wrong place, wrong time sort of thing for his career. And some of that you can argue as well. Some of that's more by sort of meaning rather than luck, as it were. But it's a shame, and obviously, but as you pointed out there, his life outside of Formula One and away from Formula One for the people of his home country and his home region where he grew up was, he made a huge impact on their lives, and that's got to be, admired and respected. And I think he was still actually officially a sitting a senator in Argentina until he passed away today.
I believe that's correct. So,
he was still very, very active in the country, and I think he'd been ill on and off for the last couple of months. And I know that they had, even on the current sort of Formula One broadcast, it had been discussed and mentioned a little bit. And it is a shame. And I know even when I was working at Williams, the name was still sort of revered within the older guard of the company, because there were some guys that were there, had been there even in his time, sort of almost 40 years ago now. But it's a real shame that we've lost somebody, but his legacy will certainly live on, for what he did in the sport, and also what he did in his home country there.
Yeah, I mean, he falls into that category of guys that probably should have won a championship, and there's several of those. Ronnie Peterson probably should have won a championship.
Without doubt, yeah.
Didier Pironi. Jackie Eakes, you've got a lot of those guys that came close, and had the skills
like that, yeah.
Oh, Gilles Villeneuve for sure, yeah. If his career wasn't cut short, Pironi career also cut short. Peterson as well, yeah. But Peterson was Peterson was signed to move to McLaren, I believe, the following year for 79.
Could well have been,
which probably wouldn't have worked out that well for him, because 79 and 80 McLaren wasn't that great. Now by 81, they started really, really up in their game. So,
but there's so many guys of that era that, due to the nature of the sport, guys like and just some of the guys that I've sort of followed, their history, guys like Gunnar Nielsen, who tragically died at a very young age, from cancer at 29. But his last season with Lotus, first half of the season, he was almost leading the championship before he had I think it was 6 or 7 unfinished, retirements in a row there. And Tom Price as well, another young, really high quality, talented driver from that era that, tragically lost his life way too young.
And that was a very freak accident that took Tom Price's life.
That was in South Africa, wasn't it?
South Africa, the Marshal was running across the track, and everyone was focused on this poor Marshal that got hit by the car. Nobody realized that the fire extinguisher had struck Tom Price square in the forehead, and they're tending to the Marshal, and nobody realized this poor guy's dead in his car as well. So another great talent. Yeah. So, all right. Well, speaking of Formula One, we did have a Formula One this race, our second in a row in Austria. So, and Max Verstappen once again put on a great show, won the race. He's won 3 in a row now, and he's beginning to put a nice little gap between him and Mr. Hamilton to make this championship quite interesting. So what are some of your takeaways from Austria Part 2?
Yeah, Austria Part 2, as you say. Yeah. The actual Austrian Grand Prix as opposed to the Styrian Grand Prix, I think this one was, wasn't it? But a fantastic performance by Red Bull again. Verstappen got the pole on Saturday morning there, and mentioning McLaren, Lando Norris put it in P2, was 500th of a second away from claiming his first pole position. So again, a fantastic performance by Lando Norris there. He's another one of those young drivers that's really sort of stepping up and showing what he's capable of. Fantastic performance there. You look at that category, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, George Russell. I put those 3 in that category of guys that really have huge potential in the sport. And they're starting to show.
Those are also
week in, week out.
Those are also 3 guys who have elevated the teams they're in,
for sure.
Because here's teams that were, it wasn't that long ago. McLaren was terrible, and Williams was terrible, and AlphaTauri wasn't anything to write home about.
No,
but now these guys are picking up points.
Oh yeah.
Contending for, Lando made the podium. Gasly's a Grand Prix winner. All 3 of these guys have not single-handedly, but certainly their presence there has had an effect on elevating those teams, which has given us, we're bridging that gap between the sharp end of the field, and it's fun to watch.
And it's it is. It's almost like a side story as well to what we're seeing here. The obviously we've got the championship, the Hamilton and Verstappen battle, which is going to go down. It may not go to the wire, if Red Bull keeps up this performance. But it's certainly week in, week out, it can go either way. And at the moment, you think Verstappen just has the edge. And if I was a betting man, I'd probably sort of push it more in Max's court right now. There's not a huge gap to Mercedes, but there's a big enough gap to struggle to see where they would overcome it, especially with the huge regulation changes next year, budget cap and the like. What can Mercedes do to find that? I mean, at the end of the day, what's Austria? Austria is like a 65-second lap or something, 64-second lap, and they're 3/10 off. That's a lot in Formula One terms over the shortest lap of the season. So that's a big gap, and I think when we get to Silverstone and these bigger tracks, Silverstone, Spa, places like that, that gap will be amplified quite considerably. I could see Red Bull being half a second ahead of Mercedes in a couple of weeks when we get to Silverstone. But going back to Austria, it was a solid performance. It was basically Red Bull doing to Red Bull what Mercedes have done for the last 6 or 7 years. It was clinical. It was effective. It was efficient. It was nothing crazy. They did what they needed to do, and nothing crazy. The biggest talking point, I think, coming out of the whole weekend was the absurd penalties that were handed down by the stewards to Lando Norris and Sergio Perez. Now, there was a safety car early on because Esteban Ocon had a bit of a knock on the front right, broke his suspension, stopped on the side of the track. So first 3 laps from the safety car, and on the restart, going into turn 4, which is really turn 3, Perez and Norris were going side by side. Norris had the inside line going into the corner, and I guess at some point Perez was inches ahead of Norris, and on the entry. And as they're going around the corner, Norris obviously on the inside, he gets around the corner faster, and he drifts over to the racing line, which is on the outside of the corner. And sort of Perez tries to hang it out there on that outside line, and basically runs out of track. He wasn't hit, he wasn't forced off, he wasn't barged off. He just ran out of track. And yeah, what can you do about it? It was a racing incident. It's 2 young drivers, 2 good quality drivers racing hard, and I didn't think anything of it. And then you see them, the stewards are investigating that. You think that's a waste of time. There'll be no penalty there. And then 5-second penalty. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Do you feel like if they continue with these kind of penalties that it's going to somewhat neuter the racing, the guys will
for sure
be a little less aggressive? They say, I think I could pull this move off, and then I'm going to 5-second penalty. So I'm not a fan of penalizing.
No, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, when it's just good hard driving for position.
We've seen in IndyCar. I remember back to where was it? Was it Portland or something where Castroneves got a penalty for weaving 2 inches or something? I'm trying to remember. That was
it was a blocking penalty. Yeah,
that's absolutely ridiculous. And this was similar. It was you cannot, in the words of a very famous tennis player, you cannot be serious. It was just ridiculous.
Been watching Wimbledon this week? Huh?
I've been watching Wimbledon. Sorry, yeah, but no, it was absolutely ridiculous. And then, of course, later in the race, Perez and Leclerc get together twice, once in turn 4 and then later in turn 6. Now, the one in turn 4, they did make contact. So I would be more, maybe that is a penalty. And then the one in turn 6, a couple of laps later, was nothing. But Perez got 2 penalties that are amassing to 10 seconds in total time there. So, maybe the first Perez one would have been, maybe. Certainly not the second one. But because they'd given Norris one, they had to give him one. And I think it was, Christian Horner turned around and said that the penalty on Lando Norris, against his own driver was uncalled for. So I don't think there's many people agreeing with that. And I think the drivers have to have a voice here. The drivers have to be able to stop and turn around to the stewards and say, look, guys, we're okay with this. Let us race. Let us, good grief, you wouldn't get through 2 laps of a cup race if that was how they policed it. Let these guys race. Let them get their elbows out a little bit. And obviously don't let them be dangerous. There's a huge difference there, but just let them, do their thing.
I fully agree. Yeah, you can't, not every pass is going to be absolutely precise. You have to, stick your note. Like the old, you need to find, if a gap exists, you need to go for it.
Yeah, and if you don't, you're not a racer. Was it Senna who said that or something?
Senna said that, it's a tribute to Senna.
So, and I think you're right there. They've certainly got to realize that these guys are racing. It's not a procession. It's not a time trial. Let these guys race. And what if they push each other off the road? Or, well, no, you see, that's the thing. They didn't push him off the road. They just took the racing line. I would have totally understood if it was going off the racing line and then he ended up forcing somebody off the track. I'd get that to a certain extent. But this wasn't. Norris was exactly the same position as his car would have been every lap of that race. And it was, although it was lap 4, it was a restart. So in theory, technically it was the first lap of the race. You're going to be a little bit out of position because you're going to be jockeying, you're going to be moving around and pushing and, trying to find that little bit of, so just that really left a bitter taste in the mouth, even though it didn't affect the overall position. I don't think it allowed Bottas to get ahead of him on the pit stop rather than get ahead of him on the track. And I think Bottas probably would have got ahead of him on the track given his pace that he had. But it enabled Mercedes to basically turn around to Bottas and say, hey, look, when Norris pits, follow him in because he's got a 5-second penalty. So as long as we don't screw anything up and machine the wheel onto the rim, because we'd do a thing like that, you'll get out ahead of him. So, it spoiled the race for Norris a little bit, but I think on pace, third place was a fantastic result. Perez obviously struggled a little bit because he dropped down the pack. Hamilton finished 4th after getting damage from running over the curbs. Some of these curbs are pretty aggressive in Austria, and apparently had, I think he got damage to the rear left side of the diffuser. Which cost him, the diffusers are so aero sensitive this year that it's, has a big knock on effect on vehicle, on car performance. And, Lando and Valtteri drove past him pretty comfortably there and, relegated Hamilton to 4th. So a poor weekend, a poor 2 weeks in a way for Mercedes, fantastic 2 weeks for Red Bull, and we move on in a couple of weeks to Silverstone and the first ever sprint race Grand Prix.
Yeah, that is going to be really interesting. I was looking at the scheduling for that, right? So we have a free practice 1, right?
Yeah,
and then the qualifying sets the grid for the sprint race.
correct.
And then there's another practice in between qualifying and the sprint race, which is a little different than what Formula One usually does.
Yep.
So this is a bit of a change in the thing, which some people are, what are we doing here? I said, well, I mean, we're why not have another practice because we've, this is a new and different thing. Now, I think it was it Lewis Hamilton that said the sprint race you're going to see nothing but a train of cars and no overtaking.
Quite possibly, because there's nothing in it. Okay, there's the qualifier, the grid is decided, but hey, at the end of the day, the qualifying on Friday is going to be pretty similar to the qualifying on Saturday, which would have set the grid for Sunday. So where is there? I think they're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Now, if you want more action-packed races, make them shorter, make the tyres degrade more, and have 2 a weekend, if that's what you want to do. But at the end of the day, this is, to my mind, the biggest overhaul in Formula One or Grand Prix racing in 71 years or whatever it may be. I fundamentally don't understand the need for it. And they're wanting to try and create a race that's action-packed and exciting and, wheel to wheel and all this sort of stuff. Well, you're never going to get that in Formula One, no matter what you do. And, it's such a difficult concept. Again, we talk about it time and time again, not just on this show, but in motorsport in general. You will have, and maybe, the biggest difference I think is going to make closer racing is the budget cap. I think that's going to have a bigger impact over the next 5 or 10 years than having sprint races. And, you might as well put damn sprinklers on the track and turn them on at a random lap or something. It just doesn't make sense to me. And as I say, I truly believe they're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. We've had some great races this year. Do you go down the route of, do almost like a NASCAR style thing? Every time there's a safety car, let's scrap the safety car in Formula One and have a restart. Everybody lines back up on the grid and away we go again. Do that. Why not? If that's what they're trying to do, if they're trying to create something entertaining, The most entertainment in a Formula One race typically is on the start. That's when people make up the most ground, typically. So, like when in Baku, safety car with 5 laps to go, pull all the cars down pit lane, have a 5-lap, 5-lap restart from a standing start. No matter when the safety car comes in, have a standing start. I don't know.
That seems awful problematic to have all those standing starts.
But if you're trying to create drama, then what is there's no points handed out for the sprint race. So unless you had a really crappy qualifying on, Friday, you're going to be like, yeah, you know what, guys, I'm just going to stay here. You're almost going to have because again, there's no points handed out. You're always going to have a gentleman's agreement between all the guys saying, hey, look, let's just put on a bit of an exhibition and drive 10 laps and nobody overtake anybody. Now, in reality,
because you've got the potential.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, you've got the potential to destroy your car to pick up 1 or maybe 2 spots on the grid.
Exactly.
No, you really want to save that for Sunday.
And you look at qualifying in Formula One now. Yeah, probably once once a race, or at every race, you'll have one guy that you think, oh yeah, he had a bad qualifying, or whatever it may be. So come the race, oh look, he's moved up from 13th to 7th or whatever, like Ricciardo or an Alonso. They had a bad qualifying at Austria. They had a reasonably good race, which and they scored some points out of it. But again, that's over a 70-lap race. What if I can't remember how long the sprint races are off the top of my head, but it's not gonna. You're not going to have enough time to regain these positions. So you're still, a little bit on the back foot come the race Sunday. So, and again, you're looking at the costs involved in this. Now, I think the FIA said you get on the budget, you get an extra $500,000 per sprint race, I think, to cover, running costs and what have you. But you look at what happened to Mercedes at Imola with Bottas's car when he had that accident with Russell. I mean, that was over $1 million of the damage. And when you've got a budget cap in place, what do? Do you fire 3 people because you had a wreck and you can't afford to pay them under the budget cap? It's a very, very grey area. And I really, as I say, I don't know what they're trying to fix.
Exactly, because it's not as if attendance is dwindling. It's not as if TV ratings are down, because they're not. Yeah, F1 is as strong as it's ever been. Following the the pandemic season with all the empty grandstands, we're getting a nice crowd back. We're getting nice TV ratings, even in the
Silverstone's going to be full.
Silverstone's going to be full, yep. But even in the US with the ESPN coverage, Formula One is getting pretty darn good ratings. So again, I don't know what we're trying to fix.
The Netflix stuff has helped them massively.
The Netflix stuff has helped massively. It's helped to gain new fans, which is something that probably IndyCar needs to probably look at some sort of a production company to come in and do something similar to that.
Oh God!
I mean, NASCAR's got plenty of programming based around them. When you consider you got both NBC and Fox. NBC and Fox both have a daily NASCAR show.
Yeah, but they're not the same, are they? They don't have that. The problem is, I don't think that. I know we're sort of getting off topic here a little bit, but the problem I have with the NASCAR Race Hub and all these sort of things that you say NBC and Fox have on a daily basis is not that much happens. I understand having what I would call a weekly magazine show. A weekly show that's about the racing and about what's going on and get some of the people. But every day it's oh my Lord, flogging a dead horse. You're talking about some really mundane things. You're creating stories that don't exist.
Yeah, you're pulling topics out of thin air. So what can we talk about today?
Yeah, exactly. So when something interesting does come along, it gets diluted down into, here's driver X, and we're going to over his house, and he's going to grill out, and we're going to have a Coke with him because he's a Coke driver, and he's going to grill some hot dogs and give everybody food poisoning. Who cares about that in reality? I mean, I don't give everybody
food poisoning. That's hilarious, man.
But these guys never used a damn grill in their life. I'm sorry. But who it really it's crap. It really is. There's no substance to it. It's like watching no disrespect to anybody that's a fan of it. It's like watching the Kardashians. You're into racing because of the racing, not the. I know it was 20, 30 years ago. NASCAR was all about the personality. NASCAR isn't about the personalities these days. Unless you want to watch you might as well. If you want to watch personalities in NASCAR, you may as well take a fish out of a lake and watch it flap around on the dock side for half an hour, because that's got the same amount of personality as some of the drivers.
Some of the to your point, some of the more flamboyant personalities that we had in NASCAR. You're talking guys like of course, Dale Sr. and Cale Yarborough, Jimmy Spencer. The only guys in there with real personality right now are Kyle Busch still has some.
Yeah, the only reason he's got a personality is because people don't like him.
Yeah, but but he likes to he likes to play that.
Play that, of course.
Black hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You'll have to have the villain there. Yeah, so.
But it's that's what the Formula One Netflix show does really well, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a nice behind the scene, but my only issue with it is it's a year behind.
Exactly.
If they could get those through post production quicker, 100%. And maybe
if that could almost a week later. Yeah. No, it'd be difficult because it'd be
difficult for sure. Yeah, because if you're going a week later, you're already filming the next episode. But I think if it was
contractual things and confidentiality things, I'm sure in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, 100% I agree. It's not like watching a drama show on TV because what's going to happen in the next episode? Well, hang on, let's just check Wikipedia. Oh, he wins the race. You know what's going to happen. So that's not quite as effective in that to that extent. But yeah, I think that they need to create. And I say Formula One is trying to create something that doesn't need to be created. And as I say, same NASCAR's doing, with some of these shows on TV, it's just, what are you doing? And I'll genuinely say that I personally think that the sprint races, I'm prepared to be, stand correct, will actually be a negative thing. In the same way that I think these NASCAR magazine shows, or however they describe them in the media world, they detract from NASCAR, because people watch them and go, what's all this about? It's not, it sort of dilutes the product, and people go, this is a little, I'm going to go and watch something else, because it's just like, it's terrible television. And there are
they could easily do it with a weekly show, but
exactly a weekly show, quantity or quality rather than quantity.
Exactly.
And again, I think it dilutes the product, and I think sprint races in Formula One will dilute the product again. You've got a fundamental problem, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, because I've said this more times than I care to remember on this show. If you have 20 cars and you put the fastest car first and the slowest car last, and you start them in that order, and you expect a load of overtaking, well, you don't really understand how racing works. What do you expect? What is a sprint race going to change about that? It's not. You're the best races you have typically are post-wet qualifying or post-qualifying where there's a red flag with a minute to go and half the field doesn't get a quick lap in, and how you have people starting out of position. Sprint races are not going to cause that. You're not going to get Alfa Romeo, you're not going to get Kimi Räikkönen winning a sprint race and starting on pole. Who's going to win the sprint race at Silverstone? Verstappen. Who's going to win the race at Silverstone? Verstappen. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's move on. Let's move on before you get any angrier. So the IndyCars were in Mid-Ohio which is one of the great American road courses, and NASCAR was at the other great American road course, which is Road America. Yeah. So, full slate all on NBC back to back, which gave NBC some pretty nice ratings for both IndyCar and NASCAR, with that block of road racing that started at noon,
wasn't it?
Yeah, started at noon and went right from the one race to the other. So as far as the IndyCar race was concerned, Joseph Newgarden wins pole, third consecutive pole, which he's not been able to convert to a win yet this year. He's had, every stupid problem known to man befall him, sometimes in the very closing laps, but he was able to get it done at Mid-Ohio, and get that monkey off his back of not having won a race this year. So, so good job on Newgarden, hardly put a wheel wrong all day, played the strategy just right. The race itself was, there were two early cautions. The first one was on lap one. It was Hunter Ray and Felix Rosenqvist got into one another. Yeah, they were both able to continue, but they did lose some time and finished there towards the back of the order. Then the second caution was just a few laps later. Will Power took a little spin, and as he tried to keep his car running and turning around, he kicked up a bunch of tire smoke, which kind of obscured the vision for the guys coming up on him, and he found himself getting run into by Ed Jones, which ended both those guys' days. But then
good job, Will.
Yep. But then the rest of the race was caution free. We saw your typical red-black strategies and whatnot, but it played out very well for Newgarden. But the more interesting thing is behind Newgarden, we had Ganassi cars second, third, and fourth. Ericsson, Palou, and Scott Dixon. And Ericsson, for his part, is really asserting himself as a very functioning and important member of this team. And we were talking the other way. When was the last time that Ganassi had three cars that had won races in the same year? And you're talking back in 2013. And even then, Charlie Kimball had won the one race, which also was in Mid-Ohio.
He wasn't
really a factor. Was he? It really wasn't a factor in the rest of the championship. Charlie's had a couple good runs at Indianapolis. That 2013 Mid-Ohio was definitely his moment in the sun. He was perfect that day. I'll give him that. But Ericsson's been very consistent. Palou's been very good. And Dixon, of course, is Dixon. Dixon, of course, Dixon. So, of course, your fourth Ganassi car, Jimmy Johnson managed to finish 22nd, which was last amongst people who didn't wreck or have mechanical issues. Last car that didn't run into an issue. So Jimmy's season isn't getting any better, although his
performance isn't getting better.
His performance isn't getting better, but I do like what he brings to the series. Because you see Carvana commercials every commercial break there, so that's good money going to it's going to help in the TV negotiations.
Oh, sure.
Because we're talking about renegotiating with NBC for next year, and the fact that they have advertisers that want to spend big money and put those ads on during IndyCar races helps their cause, right? But gosh, I'd love to see Jimmy have a bit of a better day.
Yeah,
I'd love to see Jimmy. Love to see Jimmy on an oval, right? Now, again, is that ever going to happen? Yes or no? Hard to tell. We're talking like maybe he's going to do the 500 next year. Maybe he's not, but I really think that he's still so far out of his elements.
It's interesting actually, and I did catch some of the race, the highlights of the race from the weekend, and there was two sort of mental notes that I wanted to make that I wanted to bring to the show tonight and really get your opinion on this. But firstly was the state of play at Andretti. What's going on? They've got what some people to consider, and as well as anybody, I'm not 100% convinced by it, Colton Herta, the next great American sensation. Rossi, who
finally had a decent result, which was fifth. But yeah, when a fifth place past the halfway mark of the season is your best result, that's not really good. And then Herta actually had a good race.
He was doing okay, wasn't he? But mechanical issues.
Yeah, he had problems with the pit stop. He had 25-second pit stop because they couldn't get the Buckeye to load the fuel in properly.
But you look at Rossi, and to put it bluntly, he won the 500 and he's had one good season. I mean, outside of that, should he have gone to Penske when they were courting him, 2 or 3 years ago? Has he lost his opportunity? Because I don't think Penske would take him now. I think there's far more viable options on the in the paddock now than Rossi in terms of if you were looking to pick up a new driver.
Oh yeah, Penske's probably got his eye on, from what I hear a little bit, is Rinus VeeKay, perhaps.
Yeah,
that
that's a known career path for from going from Ed Carpenter to Penske. You look at what Joseph Newgarden
for sure.
Yeah. So you look, and then so you'd say, okay, Herta and Rossi are Andretti's big guys. Okay, Herta's won a race this year. Rossi's been not great, but then you look at Ryan Hunter-Reay and James Hinchcliffe there. I really can't see either of them getting a contract next year.
No, they're both underperforming. I mean, here's guys that have won races.
For sure.
Yeah, he's won races.
They're talented race. I mean,
talented racer, but
I hate criticizing race drivers because you know what? They're a damn sight better race driver than you are, I think. But at the end of the day, that's partly what we're here to do. It is to give our opinion on this. And I just look at it and you think, if you were a young up and coming driver, VeeKay, for example, you're obviously immensely talented and you're riding this crest of a wave at the moment. So you're, almost like Rossi was a few years ago, you're right pickings for a big team to come in. And if you've got the big three, and I'd argue that now you could add McLaren to that, make it a big four. If you've got Ganassi, Penske, Andretti, and McLaren, and all four of you put a contract on, all four of them gave you a contract with equal terms, to my mind, Andretti would be bottom of that list.
Certainly, right now they are. They've not been.
They've
not been really great since.
And
2012, 2013. Prior to you can pinpoint it to the when they went with the manufacturer aero kits.
Yeah.
And that's what that's what they initially blamed their fall off in performance on, was the fact that they were saddled with all the testing of the aero kits from Honda. Okay. Well, that era's passed. Now we have the universal aero kit.
You're 8 years past that, whatever it may be.
And Andretti was not saddled with testing that. So what's wrong now?
Well, you know what? I think that personally, I think they're spread too thin. Not just in IndyCar. I mean, they've got 4 cars in IndyCar. Name a 4-car team that has ever been really successful. I think 3 is the right number, especially in IndyCar. 2 or 3. I think as soon as you get into 4, you're diluting your talent pool of engineers, because there's only so many engineers you can employ. You're diluting your talent pool. But also they're diluted outside of it. You look at all the other series that they're involved with. It's, they're almost like Rick Ware, in terms of what they're trying to do. And I just think that can't be good, because at the end of the day, IndyCar obviously is their main aim and their main focus. But the other things that they're involved with, the Formula E, I think they're in Extreme E, I think they're in some of the endurance.
They're doing the they used to call it the Pirelli Cup. I forget what they call it this day and age. The
Pirelli World Challenge,
the Blauplank World Challenge or whatever. They've got
you see, you've got two. You got the Blanchimont, and you've got the not Blanchimont. Yeah, I can't remember. You've got the Pirelli World Challenge, and that's what we had him on the show a couple of years ago. Jared Andretti's
Jared
racing.
Andretti. Yeah, he's still, and he's
Yeah.
performing well. He's winning races here and there. Yeah.
I sort of bumped into VIR a couple of years ago, but when he was competing in that series. But yeah, they're very, very thinly spread amongst us, and I wonder if that's causing them issues. I'm saying that Ganassi, they're in Extreme E and they're doing okay for themselves, aren't they? So I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, Ganassi is looking to, or he has.
He sold his cup team.
His cup team. He's got all that off of his plate for next year. But Ganassi hasn't really lost a step in IndyCar.
No.
By adding the NASCAR or the E or the Cadillac program.
Yeah.
So, and I've always
see
Andretti was the first to be really successful with the 4-car model. Back in 2003, 2004. But how many years are we from
nearly
there?
20 years ago.
And the field was more diluted then.
Exactly.
The field is a lot closer than it was then, because you had Andretti. I mean, they were right up there with top drivers, top engineers, top teams and they're fighting against Penske and Ganassi. You didn't have these Ed Carpenters in there winning races. You didn't have
the
McLaren in there winning races.
Yeah,
you didn't have Dale Coyne sneaking a win here and there,
or even Fight, or whoever coming in and nicking one every now and again. Or Ray Hall or guys like that. It is.
Ray Hall for sure. Yeah, I don't want to talk about Ray Hall before we move on. So.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the joys of IndyCar, isn't it? It is that very deep field. But it also highlights underperformance as well, because you sit there and partly due to the name and partly due to some recent performances, Andretti put themselves on a bit of a pedestal there and say, we're going into the season wanting to win the championship. Well, how many times has that happened? It hasn't really. And you wonder if, and I try to be careful saying this because you don't want to sound disrespectful, but I wonder if when they have performed well, it's not because they've been good, it's because others have been bad.
Now, there's times Andretti's been quite good, particularly if you look at their Indy 500 record. They've been quite good. Now Rossi's win was a bit of a fluke, but Hunter Ray was very good all day. Weldon was very good all day. Franchitti was very good all day. A little bit of a fluke there, but the guy that could have won without the rain was Tony Kanaan, who was also in the Andretti car. And then, of course, Takuma Sato was very good all day on his Indy win with Andretti. Of course, there are times that the Andretti team has been really good, but to your point, it's been almost a decade since their last championship. Or I'm sorry, because 2012. Ryan Hunter-Reay won the last championship, so they're overdue, and they've pinned their hopes on Rossi being their guy. And a combination of there's only so many times you could say that it's bad luck. Bad luck, mechanical failures, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can do it, but there are days when you've seen Rossi just dominate the field. We saw Watkins Glen a couple years ago. There was Long Beach where he just destroyed the field, but I mean, where is that now?
Yeah, no, exactly. And you just look at it, and it doesn't look commanding. It doesn't look like they've got that, ability to week out.
Yeah, I think Andretti's there's gonna be a pretty big shakeup at Andretti. For 2022, as much as I really like the guy, I think Hunter Ray is going to be out the door. Sure. I think Hinchcliffe, this full-time ride is going to be scratched as a failed project.
Unfortunately,
he really, and I love Hinch to death, right? But he has not shown any signs of anything other than being mediocre. Solid. This year.
Yeah.
So But let's talk about the Rahal team quick, so we can save a little
quickly.
time.
Go on.
Because I just wanted to, since you brought up Rahal, we had, Rahal has been, wanting to expand to a third car for years now. They've been talking about it. They're just trying to get the funding in, right? So they brought Santino Ferrucci in for Indy, and now they seemingly keep bringing him back. He was racing again. He was racing again at Mid Ohio. They've got the Hy-Vee grocery store chain, and they're sponsoring him along with a couple of other associate sponsors like Mountain Dew and Cheetos that are, the B2B deal with Hy-Vee. But they keep bringing Ferrucci back, and Ferrucci had a pretty good day. I mean, he finished ninth, finished in the top 10. And I just wonder how many more times they're going to bring him back before they say this is going to be our third car. Now, I don't know. I don't know if the Hy-Vee sponsorship will translate to a full season, because I believe that Hy-Vee is kind of a Midwest centered grocery store chain. Which is why, like in Indianapolis, Road America.
I mean, I know
Ohio, I don't think they're out in the West Coast that I know of. No, they're not here where I live in Kentucky.
No, they're not over here in North Carolina. I know that where my wife's from in Kansas City, they're based out there. So yeah, I think they are a sort of like we've got Food Line over here on the East Coast. I think it's more of a regional grocery store than national, but they are reasonably big name sponsors that they're bringing in there, and you can understand it. He's a talented driver, for sure. And even when he's been doing the Xfinity races, he's impressed. He still has that lingering sort of doubt over him, don't they, from some of his antics in Formula 2 and what have you. There is that sort of
the interesting thing here is that a lot of people in the States are just barely aware of it. There are some of you, most of your casual fans are barely aware of that. Now you're people that really like to delve in and study and look up drivers. They know all about that. And even then, I think, some of that whole situation has been blown a bit out of proportion.
Yeah. I mean,
a little bit. A little bit.
The people that probably sign the checks are pretty well aware of those goings on, which make it a little bit difficult for him. But the guy, obviously, at the end of the day, he's got talent, and he has the ability to be, he deserves his place on that grid for sure. And even if he were to take up, the Xfinity series, full time, he'd deserve his place on that grid as well. So whatever he does, I think he does deserve a place, out there at some point. But it'd be great to see them add a third car and add a bit of competition, and again, maybe they can start sort of knocking on that door on a more regular basis, because. Graham Rahal's again, I'm in no position to criticize a driver. He's a competent driver. Is he a championship winning driver? No. I think I can say, he can win races. He can show that he can be, extremely competitive, such as he was at Indy this year. And if it wasn't for that wheel failure, who knows where he may have finished. But I don't think he's a championship caliber driver in the long term. I don't think.
And then to your point, Takuma Sato's not setting the world on fire this year either.
No, I mean, he's 43 now, 44 probably. So he's probably getting towards the end of his career, in all fairness to the guy. But I still think it's experience could count a lot in IndyCar, probably more so than almost any other single-seater series in the world. So, it could Ferrucci be that young kid who can come in and lead the next generation of Rahal, as a team, potentially, yeah. Who knows? But both of their current drivers, I don't think will be on the grid in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. So they certainly have to look for somebody new anyway.
Yeah, but to my original point, it was just like that. Santino had nothing going on in IndyCar other than trying to find a ride for the 500. Once he found that, they keep asking him back. So that's for him, and for the team. The fact that the sponsor keeps saying, "Oh, sure, yeah, we'll go to Ohio, we'll go to Wisconsin." Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think that's really good for the Rahal team, because they've been trying for years to secure the funding to run 3 cars full time, because that's where they feel they need to be. And to that point, McLaren feels the same way. They're looking to secure a third.
I think that's
car
a sweet
for
spot,
next
isn't
year,
it? I think 3 is that sweet spot. Is that, and I think Ed Carpenter as well could be looking at that as well from some of the rumors I've heard.
Yeah,
Although
they would benefit
not as well progressed as some of the other 3 car, rumors that the Ray Hall and the McLarens. I think, of the 3, I think Ed Carpenter will be the last to do it, but I know there's certainly talks about it, should we say?
For sure. All right. Well, we're out of time. So
yeah.
I just looked at the clock. We're out of time. So I guess we should mention a NASCAR race that Road America and Chase Elliott won his 13th career win.
Yeah. 8 of them have been on road courses.
8 of them have been on road courses. Yep. I think the one he missed out was the one at Sonoma that Larson won. So good for Chase. Good for that. The Hendrick team continues to be at the top of the grid there. Nice performance, middle of the race from Austin Cindric. Yeah. And they put him in an additional Penske car for the day.
He's getting closer and closer to the Indy 500.
He's gonna he's getting to that Indy 500. So all right, so next week we have
Atlanta,
right? And after the race, they're gonna repave and resurface the track, which a lot of people are say because they've been resisting repaving Atlanta for years because the racing surface is so perfectly cured, but it's also getting old. So who do you like?
What? Atlanta. Sorry, very quickly. I know we're short on time. Atlanta have pulled the perfect situation here because you know what? If they repave it and the racing's crap, they're just going to blame the next gen car or the Gen 7 car or whatever it's going to be.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they're not stupid. They've seen this one coming. They've been holding off as long as they could. Perfect situation. These new cars aren't suited to this track.
All right, so now there's a week break before the British Grand Prix, right?
There is, yeah.
And IndyCar's got a bit of a long break because should have had Toronto win there, but IndyCar will race again in early August in the Nashville Street Race, which is I was looking at their ticket website. They have sold a ton of tickets for that race. That's going to be a great crowd there. That's going to be a fun event. I can't wait to get down there. Nashville's a fun town to visit. And then, of course, NASCAR will be at Atlanta this week. So we can make a pick for Atlanta real quick.
Kevin Harvick.
All right.
Come out of his slump.
And I'll go with, Kyle Larson. It goes back to, he said had to give Chase one, and then I'm back to, I'll win the rest for the year.
Had a week off.
All right. So thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Good show tonight. Again, rest in peace, Carlos Reutemann. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.